Vladimir Savich came into the world on January 10th, 1945, in Sacramento, California, born prematurely to a family of Croatian descent. His father, a California Highway Patrol officer and former bomber pilot, took one look at the infant's spindly arms and legs and gave him a nickname that would stick for life: Spider. It was the kind of name that seemed almost prophetic, because Spider Savich would grow up to move across snow with an agility and grace that few could match. What no one knew at the time is that his death would go on to be one of the most disturbing unsolved mysteries in American sports history. The Savich family lived in Keyburz, a remote mountain town near Lake Tahoe, where Spider attended a one-room schoolhouse and learned to ski almost before he could walk. Their local hill was Edelweiss, a modest ski area along Highway 50, where a German émigré coach named Lutz Eineder taught Spider European-style racing technique. Spider and his brother Steve became junior standouts, part of a scrappy group of local racers. After Sunday Mass at the little Catholic church across the highway from the ski area, Spider and Steve would strap on their skis and head straight for the slopes. It was an idyllic, almost storybook upbringing, and it laid the foundation for everything that followed. Spider's talent earned him a ski scholarship to the University of Colorado, where he came under the mentorship of legendary coach Bob Beatty. By the mid-1960s, he joined the U.S. ski team, and in 1968, at just 22 years old, he competed at the Winter Olympics in Grenoble, France. He finished fifth in the slalom, matching fellow American Billy Kidd's giant slalom result as the best U.S. performance at those games. 2 months later, he won a World Cup slalom at Heavenly Valley, just 30 miles from his hometown. He went on to rack up multiple podium finishes and 18 top 10 results across his World Cup career, establishing himself as one of America's premier ski racers. Spider wasn't content with the constraints of amateur competition. In 1971, he left the World Cup circuit to join the fledgling World Pro Ski Tour, founded by his mentor Bob Beatty. The tour featured a thrilling head-to-head elimination format with courses that included jumps amid the gates, making it far more telegenic than traditional racing. Spider thrived in this new arena, winning the overall professional championship in both 1971 and 1972. His good looks and magnetic personality made him the perfect face for the sport's expansion into mainstream culture. The prize money was modest. Spider earned just over $21,000 as champion in 1971, but endorsements pushed his annual income well over $100,000, serious money for a professional athlete at the time. He moved to Aspen, building a chalet in the exclusive gated community of Starwood, near the home of singer John Denver. He even earned his pilot's license and flew his own twin-engine plane to racing events, further enhancing his public profile and his celebrity status. An injury in 1973 limited his performance on the slopes, but at the same time his public profile just continued to rise. In 1974, he appeared on the cover of GQ magazine. Spider Savich wasn't just a ski racer anymore. He was a celebrity living a life that seemed impossibly glamorous. At a celebrity ski race in Bear Valley, California in 1972, Spider met Claudine Longet, a French-born singer and actress who was the estranged wife of entertainer Andy Williams. The attraction between them was immediate and intense. Before long, Spider had moved Longet and her 3 children into his home, and they became one of Aspen's most visible couples. But the relationship was far from smooth. Friends later said the couple argued frequently and that Longet could be intensely jealous. There were reports she'd thrown a wine glass at Spider's head during one argument and tried to prevent him from attending social events. By 1975, Longet was reportedly looking into building a separate house so the couple could live apart. People close to Spider said he'd been talking about ending the relationship. He was accustomed to a freewheeling bachelor lifestyle, and living with Longe and her children had begun to feel like a constraint. On the afternoon of Sunday, March 21st, 1976, Spider returned to his home after a training session at Aspen Highlands and a subsequent dinner visit with Bob Beatty, his mentor. He stripped down to his thermal underwear and headed into the bathroom to shower. What happened next has been debated for nearly 5 decades. For reasons that remain unclear and disputed, Claudine Longe entered the bathroom carrying an imitation Luger. A single shot struck Spider in the abdomen, piercing his pancreas and stomach and severing a major artery. He lost a catastrophic amount of blood before an ambulance arrived. Spider died en route to Aspen Valley Hospital, with Longe at his side. He was 31 years old. Longe told police the shooting was an accident, claiming she'd picked up the weapon and asked Spider to show her how it worked. Police had immediate doubts. An autopsy indicated that when the Luger was fired, Spider had been bent over and facing away from Claudine and had been at least 6 feet from her. That positioning didn't align with someone demonstrating a weapon to the person holding it. Additionally, ballistics testing showed that the trigger had likely been pulled more than once, indicating that something went wrong on the first pull. Detectives were also highly skeptical that this so-called demonstration was done inside the house rather than outside. Longe was charged with reckless manslaughter on April 8, 1976. The trial, held in January 1977, became a media spectacle that transformed sleepy Aspen into a circus. Andy Williams flew in to support his ex-wife, sat beside her throughout proceedings, and paid for her legal defense. More than 300 prospective jurors were placed on standby before a final panel was seated. This reflected the fact that both Claudine and Spider were so well known, both in the community and nationally. The prosecution's case was severely hampered by procedural errors. Officers had taken a blood sample from Longe without a warrant. That sample reportedly showed significant amounts of Colombian confetti flowing through her bloodstream. They'd also seized her personal diary without proper authorization or any sort of warrant. Prosecutors said the diary contradicted her claim that the relationship was stable, a fact which could have significantly undermined her defense. Both the blood results and the diary were ruled inadmissible, stripping the prosecution of potentially devastating evidence. With this evidence put aside, the district attorney built his remaining case around the autopsy report, arguing that the physical evidence made an accidental shooting nearly impossible. The defense countered that the weapon was faulty and unreliable and had been a cheap imitation of a real Luger. After 4 days of testimony, the jury deliberated roughly 4 hours before returning a verdict. They convicted Longe not of the sought-after felony, but of misdemeanor criminal negligence. She was sentenced to 30 days in jail, and to top it all off, she was hit with a $25 fine. And no, you don't have to rewind there. You heard me correctly. The fine was $25. The sentence outraged the Savage family and much of the American public, and the manner in which it was carried out bothered people even more. Claudine was allowed to choose when to serve her 30 days and opted to do most of it on weekends, while her kids were away with their famous dad. Public anger intensified when she was spotted vacationing with her defense attorney, Ron Austin, shortly afterward. She married Austin in 1985, and the couple lived in Aspen for decades before eventually relocating to Hawaii. The Savage family filed a wrongful death lawsuit, ultimately settling out of court with a confidentiality agreement that barred Longe from publicly discussing the case. Spider's brother Steve later offered a blunt assessment, saying that Claudine had accomplished only 2 things in her life: marrying Andy Williams and getting away with it. For an event that has been virtually forgotten in the present day, The cultural fallout was considerable. Saturday Night Live aired a sketch in its first season featuring a mock ski shooting competition named after Long Jay, in which skiers were picked off mid-run. The Rolling Stones recorded a song called Claudine for a 1978 album, which very strongly implies that Claudine got away with slaying Spider. And in case you tuned in to watch for music recommendations, I listened to the song and I have to say, I can see why it's not well known, but your mileage may vary, of course. Spider Savage was inducted posthumously into the U.S. Ski and Snowboard Hall of Fame in 2022, 46 years after his death. Claudine Longet is still married to her former defense lawyer, and at this point, even if she admitted that she slew Spider intentionally, she couldn't be prosecuted again due to double jeopardy. On the evening of February 11, 1976, a man calling himself Joseph Donati stepped out of a friend's apartment in San Francisco's quiet outer Sunset neighborhood. He walked toward his parked car near the corner of 25th Avenue and Moraga Street, fishing for his keys. It was an ordinary scene on an ordinary block of squat pastel row houses. Then a white van screeched around the corner, and blasts shattered the stillness. 4 rounds struck the man at nearly point-blank range. He was dead before he hit the pavement. Though he carried a loaded revolver in his jacket, he never had a chance to reach for it. When police arrived, they quickly discovered that while Joseph Donati officially existed, this was a well-established alias. The dead man was Joseph Barboza, one of the most feared hitmen in American organized crime, and the first person to die after entering the Federal Witness Protection Program. To understand how Barboza ended up bleeding out on a San Francisco sidewalk, we've got to go back to the beginning. He was born on September 20th, 1932, in New Bedford, Massachusetts, to Portuguese immigrant parents. His father was a middleweight boxer who eventually abandoned the family, leaving Barboza's mother, a seamstress, to raise 4 children alone. That departure when Joe was around 12 seemed to light a fuse that never went out. Joe was getting arrested before he'd finished his teenage years and was shipped off to the Lyman School for Boys, a so-called reform institution that served as a finishing school for criminals. By 18, he'd been sentenced to 5 years at the Massachusetts Correctional Institution in Concord. While there, he led a wild prison break in 1953. He and 6 other inmates overpowered 4 guards and fled in stolen cars, only to be recaptured within 24 hours. Like his father, Barboza tried boxing, fighting as a light heavyweight under the name The Baron. He won 8 of roughly 11 professional bouts, 5 by knockout, but legitimate athletics couldn't contain his appetite for violence. He drifted between jobs as a longshoreman and a fruit store clerk, always circling back to crime. After his parole in 1958, he became a fixture in East Boston's underworld, holding court at a bar on Bennington Street that locals called Barboza's Corner. The nickname that would follow Barboza to his grave originated during an incident at a nightclub frequented by Patriarca crime family members. When an older patron complained about Barboza's behavior, Barboza slapped the man across the face. Patriarca underboss Henry Tamaleo, seated nearby, angrily ordered Barboza never to touch anyone with his hands again. Without missing a beat, Barboza leaned over and bit the man's ear. Some accounts say he chewed off a piece of the man's cheek. Either way, he was now known as the Animal. Despite his Portuguese heritage, Barboza rose to become one of the most prolific hitmen for Raymond Patriarca's New England crime family during the 1960s. He's believed to have slain as many as 26 people, though that number has never been verified. However, he needed a way to generate income between big hits, and given his close ties with the Patriarca crime family, he had free rein to conduct his business. His crew operated across Boston, generating substantial income through loan sharking and generalized intimidation. However, by 1966, Barbosa's position had become dangerously unstable. He'd been shot at outside his Chelsea home and wasn't following the traditional rules of the mob. He tried shaking down a nightclub already paying protection to the Patriarcha underboss in Boston. That recklessness made him a target from all sides. While it was never confirmed with certainty that a contract was put out on him by his own people, he certainly believed this was the case. Everything changed in 1967 when Barbosa was jailed on federal weapons charges. Federal agents reinforced the idea that he had a contract on his head and that his former friends had turned foe. Given that he wasn't safe on the streets or in prison, the agents convinced him that it was time to turn on everyone he worked for, and in exchange, he could enter witness protection. And just to be clear here, by turn on the other mob guys, I mean testify against them, in case anyone was wondering about my phrasing there. He testified against Raymond Patriarcha himself, helping secure an indictment for conspiracy to eliminate bookies in New England. But the most consequential and ultimately most damaging chapter of Barbosa's cooperation involved the 1965 slaying of small-time criminal Teddy Deegan. Barbosa took the stand and named 6 men as participants in Deegan's hit. After 50 days of testimony, the jury convicted all 6. 4 received death sentences, and 2 others got life in prison. The problem was that at least 4 of those men were completely innocent. Barbosa had lied under oath, implicating them based on personal grudges and at the encouragement of his handlers. The actual perpetrators included Barbosa himself and Vincent Flemmi, who happened to be a valuable informant the FBI wanted to protect. Interestingly, the wrongly accused men spent a combined total of over 100 years in prison, with the state government eventually paying out over $100 million to their families. But that wouldn't come out until long after Barbosa's death, and for the time being, he had fulfilled his end of the bargain. After his testimony, Barbosa was relocated to Santa Rosa, California, under a new identity. The government enrolled him in culinary school, leveraging his genuine talent as a cook who specialized in Portuguese delicacies. But Barbosa couldn't stay out of trouble. In the summer of 1970, he eliminated a small-time criminal named Clay Wilson during a dispute over stolen goods. He shot Wilson while the two were out walking with 2 women, then hid the body under a tree stump. When arrested, Barbosa essentially blackmailed the government by threatening to recant his Boston testimony. He told the local detectives that he was actually in witness protection and that he had made up large parts of the story that took a bite out of the New England mob. But then he also told them that he had implicated people based on who the FBI told him to target, prompting FBI agents to rush to California and serve as character witnesses at his trial. With numerous federal agents willing to stake their careers on what a great guy Barbosa really was, and with potential federal pressure, he was offered a sweetheart deal. Ultimately, Barbosa was sentenced to 5 years at Folsom Prison, where he wrote poetry about the mob and about his crimes. He was paroled in October 1975 and given yet another identity, this time as Joseph Donati. He moved into a cheap apartment near Ocean Beach in San Francisco and got a job as a cook at a restaurant near City Hall. The FBI maintained loose surveillance, but Barbosa had essentially stopped hiding, and he just couldn't stay away from illicit activities. He harbored ambitions of filling what he perceived as a leadership void in San Francisco's organized crime scene. That ambition led him to reconnect with James Chalmers, a small-time South Boston hoodlum. The two met regularly to discuss criminal schemes. What Barbosa didn't know was that Chalmers was working a criminal scheme already, and Barbosa wasn't to be a partner, but the target. He was actively betraying him, confirming all details before tipping off members of the New England Mafia about his location. While it's never been confirmed with any absolute certainty, federal agents later caught members of the mafia talk about what happened to Barboza. According to these recordings, they dispatched two top-level enforcers to San Francisco to handle the matter personally. If the recordings are to be believed, the mafia thought this was so important that they had two made men complete the hit themselves. According to the recordings, they watched and waited, since everything had to be perfect, as they knew that they would only get one shot. On that February evening, as Barboza left Chalmas's apartment and approached his car, a white van rolled up fast, and shots fired, cutting him down. Barboza was 43 years old. Interestingly, in a statement given by Barboza's attorney about the slaying, he said that society had suffered no great loss, a remarkably candid statement. Despite the recordings, no one was ever charged in relation to his death, and some conspiracy-minded individuals have speculated that the FBI essentially let it happen. Some have speculated that no one was ever prosecuted for the crime, despite the evidence, because it would have exposed the unethical activities of the agents assigned to his case. Not only that, the prosecution may have caused all the convictions against members of the New England Mafia to fall apart, leading to numerous organized crime figures being released. Though there's no direct proof of this, he was a man that held tremendous ability to personally blackmail numerous agents who had worked on his case. Joseph Barboza left behind a deeply troubling legacy. He was a vicious predator who terrorized New England's underworld for the better part of a decade. He was also a cooperating witness whose perjured testimony destroyed the lives of innocent men and their families for over 3 decades. And he was, in many ways, a pawn of an FBI willing to sacrifice justice in its conflict against organized crime. Christine Lindsay Walters was 23 years old in the fall of 2008, and by all accounts, she embraced life with open arms. Born on August 8, 1985, and raised in Deerfield, Wisconsin, she'd grown into a warm, curious, and independent young woman. She was a junior at the University of Wisconsin at Stevens Point, studying botany and ethnobotany. Outside coursework, she worked on an organic farm near campus, taught yoga and Pilates classes, and radiated the kind of energy that drew people to her. In July 2008, Christine traveled to Portland, Oregon, to visit friends during summer break. She'd planned to stay 3 weeks and return for the fall semester, but the West Coast captivated her. She fell in love with the closeness to nature, the freedom, and the alternative communities that seemed to share her values. She extended her stay, eventually connecting with self-described spiritual environmentalists, and before long, she'd made her way south to Humboldt County in California. This was a decision that would change everything as she became fully entangled in this region that has a rather sinister reputation. Humboldt County sits along the northern California coast, roughly 300 miles north of San Francisco. It's a region of towering redwood forests, rugged coastline, and small towns like Eureka and Arcata that have long attracted artists, students, and people seeking a simpler life. But Humboldt also forms part of the Emerald Triangle, a 3-county area encompassing Humboldt, Trinity, and Mendocino. This has historically been by far the largest weed-producing region in the country, and beneath the natural beauty and counterculture charm, there's a darker reality. The region has an unusually high rate of missing persons, and law enforcement resources are stretched thin across vast, densely forested terrain that can swallow people whole. Some locals and online sleuths have taken to calling the area the Black Hole for exactly that reason. Christine arrived in late September 2008, gravitating toward Arcata and becoming interested in spirituality, environmental activism, and off-the-grid living. Her mother, Anita Walters, would later tell the Eureka Times Standard that she believed Christine was too trusting of the people she met in California. Christine had been keeping regular phone contact with her family during her travels, but after settling in Humboldt, her calls became less frequent. When she did call, she asked her parents for money on several different occasions, with her father obliging these requests. Around November 7, 2008, Christine participated in what's commonly called a tea ceremony in the Arcata area. A private investigator later hired by her family uncovered that the ceremony involved ayahuasca, a powerful hallucinogenic brew made from South American plants. Ayahuasca's effects can include vomiting, diarrhea, and intense hallucinations lasting up to 10 hours. It's also known to trigger severe psychological reactions in predisposed individuals, including mania and depression. Around 20 people reportedly gathered for the ceremony, led by someone claiming to be a shaman. What happened to Christine during or after that ceremony remains a central mystery. She apparently stayed with other participants for several days before leaving on her own the evening of November 11th. The next morning, a couple on Tompkins Hill Road, roughly 20 miles away, found her on their doorstep. She was barely clothed, cold, hungry, and thirsty, her body covered in briar scratches and lacerations. Her feet were nearly raw, as though she'd been running barefoot through the woods for hours. She was confused and visibly terrified. The homeowners called police, and Humboldt County deputies transported Christine to a local hospital. She appeared deeply frightened and said someone was after her, but wouldn't provide specifics about what had happened. She was evasive about her injuries, claiming at one point that she'd simply walked a long way and spoke of demons who could hear what she was saying and were trying to get her. Drug test came back negative, and because she was a legal adult who didn't wish to be detained, authorities released her. Notably, the hospital has taken serious criticism for not placing her on a psychiatric hold in response to her behavior, though she apparently wasn't deemed a hazard to herself or others. From there, she was taken to the Red Lion Hotel located in Eureka, where she would spend her final known days. From the hotel, Christine called her mother multiple times. She was paranoid and afraid, insisting that people would find her wherever she went. She told her mother she'd been to hell and back, and had seen demons while running through the woods in the days after the ceremony. Anita Walters wanted to fly to California and bring her daughter home personally, but Christine insisted she was a grown-up and could manage on her own. The plan was for her to obtain replacement identification so she could fly home, as she had lost all her documents in the aftermath of the ceremony. On November 14th, around 1 in the afternoon, Christine dropped her hotel keys at the front desk and walked out wearing pajamas and slippers. She went to a print shop in Eureka, where her mother had faxed copies of identification documents that she would need to be replaced. The owner later told investigators Christine appeared nervous and paranoid, looking over her shoulder and trying to hide her papers. She asked directions to the DMV about a mile away, then walked out. Christine Walters has never been seen or heard from again. She was reported missing on November 17, 2008. After her disappearance, Christine's belongings, including money and a large backpack borrowed from a college friend, were found at a spiritual center in Arcata. The center's owner knew Christine and said it wasn't unusual for her to leave things there while walking in the nearby Arcata Community Forest. However, this potential break in the case went nowhere, and it was never confirmed exactly when she left the backpack at the center. According to some versions of the timeline, this may indicate that she was last seen by someone in one of the communities she drifted in and out of. One of the most widely discussed explanations is that Christine may have experienced a severe psychological episode shortly before her disappearance. She had participated in that tea ceremony days before she was found injured and visibly frightened on a rural doorstep outside Arcata. Ayahuasca contains a powerful hallucinogen, and even though a drug test came back negative at the hospital, her behavior has led many to believe it triggered an acute psychotic break. Proponents of this theory suggest that Christine may have wandered away from civilization, possibly into the dense forests of the region, and succumbed to the elements. Given the rugged, heavily wooded terrain of Humboldt County, a disoriented person could easily become lost or suffer fatal injuries with little chance of being found. Another theory is that Christine may have chose to leave society and adopt a more reclusive, off-grid lifestyle. Before her disappearance, she had shown a growing interest in alternative living, spirituality, and environmental causes. However, this theory has weakened over time, given that there has been absolutely no communication between Christine and her family in almost 20 years. The final theory is that she may have been abducted or otherwise fallen victim to foul play. Notably, individuals undergoing mental health crises are at extremely high risk of meeting with violence under the best circumstances. However, Christine was far away from home, isolated from friends and family, and in a region of the country known for criminality. Because Humboldt County is part of the Emerald Triangle, some theorists argue that Christine could have fallen victim to violence or exploitation after she left the copy center. The area's reputation for high rates of missing persons has fueled speculation that locals are too afraid of the criminal elements in their midst to cooperate with the cops. Some theorists have also noted that the area may be a hotspot for serial predators looking to take advantage of the trusting nature of the free-spirited types who flock there. In the end, Christine's case has gone cold, and ultimately there's no solid evidence in any direction to indicate what actually happened to her. Hey everyone, it's Jimmy here with a quick reminder to like and share this video if you're enjoying it and to hit the notification bell. Also, don't forget to check out the Patreon or the YouTube membership to take your support for my channel to the next level. Sometime in the year 1628, a man named David Thompson vanished from the face of the earth. He didn't leave a note. He didn't say goodbye to anyone whose account has survived the centuries. He simply ceased to exist in the historical record, as if the Atlantic winds had swept him clean off the page of colonial New England history. What makes this disappearance so striking isn't just the inherent mystery of it. It's the fact that Thompson was, by nearly every measure, the most important early settler in a region that would eventually become the state of New Hampshire. He'd founded settlements, fed starving pilgrims, and successfully navigated the dangerous politics between English colonists and indigenous peoples. He also successfully secured one of the most significant land grants in early American history. And then, just like that, despite all his accomplishments, he was gone, never to be heard from or seen again. David Thompson was likely born around 1590 and baptized at St. James Church in Clerkenwell, a medieval parish in central London. His parents were of Scottish descent and were descendants of an influential noble family, with his father being a high-ranking clergyman. It's believed that through this Scottish noble connection, his family knew King James VI, who would eventually be crowned James I of England. Through this connection, he came into contact with Sir Fernando Gorges, who had become obsessed with the colonization of New England. He'd been captivated by indigenous Americans who'd been brought to England, and he spent decades promoting settlements across the Atlantic. Thompson became one of his key agents. He was also an apothecary, a pre-modern pharmacist, and he took multiple trips to New England in this capacity prior to his final journey in 1619. In the spring of 1623, Thompson arrived at the mouth of the Piscataqua River with his wife, his young son John, and a small group of craftsmen and fishermen. They established what became known as Panaway Plantation, located at what is now Odorn's Point in Rye, New Hampshire. Under the terms of his indenture with 3 Plymouth investors, Thompson and his crew were expected to run a profitable fishing and trading operation for 5 years. In exchange, they'd receive 6,000 acres of land and an island of Thompson's choosing. Importantly, the charter had been acknowledged by King James himself, bolstering the authority of Thompson's claim to the land substantially. After all, with a legitimate charter from the king, so long as the land was in English possession, there was no higher authority to appeal to. The settlers constructed a fortified stone house, a stockade, and fish processing facilities on nearby Flake Hill. In 1623, the famous Captain Miles Standish arrived from Plymouth Colony, desperate for food to sustain the struggling pilgrims. Thompson provided him with a shipload of salted cod, an act that some historians credit with inspiring what became the Second Thanksgiving at Plymouth. Captain Richard Gorges, the son of Sir Fernando, also visited Panaway and formally deputized Thompson as an officer of the Council for New England. Despite these accomplishments and political connections, the fishing operation wasn't particularly lucrative. Thompson himself expressed doubts about the viability of England's various colonization efforts. By around 1625 or 1626, he'd made the decision to relocate his family southward to a fertile 170-acre island in what would become Boston Harbor. That island still bears his name today, Thompson Island. Thompson's move to the island made him and his family among the very first European settlers of what would eventually become Boston. He arrived 4 years before the Great Puritan Migration of 1630 brought 20,000 English settlers flooding into the Massachusetts Bay Colony. On the island, he established another trading post, likely engaging in fur trade with the people who lived in the surrounding area. Back in New Hampshire, his departure left Panaway Plantation without its leader. It's unclear whether any of his direct employees stayed behind. That said, some families stayed and tried to make do while fishing and trading, but it appears that it was rudderless without Thompson. The settlement faltered, and by around 1630, it appears to have been abandoned entirely. The buildings fell into disrepair, and the exact location of Thompson's original structures has never been confirmed through archaeology. And then came 1628. David Thompson, by then in his mid to late 30s, vanished. The historical record simply goes silent. There's no death certificate, no burial record, no contemporary account of what happened to him. He was alive and running a trading operation, and then he wasn't. Historians have put forward 2 main theories. The first and most commonly cited is that Thompson drowned in Boston Harbor. Life on a small island in the 17th century was inherently dangerous. The waters were unpredictable, small boats were unreliable, and a man who spent his days fishing and trading would have been on the water constantly. An accidental drowning wouldn't have been unusual, and in such a sparsely populated area, a body lost to the harbor might never have been recovered. The second theory is darker. Some historians have suggested that Thompson was the victim of foul play. He'd spent years serving as a mediator in tense and sometimes hostile conflicts between expanding English colonial groups and indigenous inhabitants. That kind of work made enemies on both sides, with colonial groups seeing him as having gone native, and indigenous groups seeing him as not fully explaining deals. The early colonial period was rife with violence, territorial disputes, and competing interests. A man who positioned himself between those forces was always at risk. There's also the matter of Thompson's widow. She remarried remarkably quickly, wedding Samuel Maverick of nearby Noddle's Island, which is now the site of Boston's Logan Airport. And if you're thinking that Logan isn't located on an island, you're correct. The narrow gap of water was filled in the early 20th century, but I digress. The speed of the remarriage wasn't necessarily suspicious by 17th century standards, as women in the colonies often needed the economic and social protection. But it does suggest that whatever happened to Thompson was understood to be final. There was no period of waiting or hoping for his return. He was simply accepted as gone. In the wake of Thompson's disappearance, the political landscape of New England shifted rapidly. By 1629, Captain John Mason and Sir Fernando Gorges divided the territory that had originally been granted under Thompson's charter. Mason took the southern portion and named it New Hampshire, after the English county of Hampshire. Gorges claimed what became the province of Maine. Thompson's son, John, later had to fight a legal battle to recover ownership of Thompson Island from the town of Dorchester, which had absorbed it. He eventually succeeded, though the island later passed to other hands, and Thompson himself would largely disappear from the history books, as he did in life.